good evening. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to Talking Sports with Evan. Joined again by Alex Strouf, ESPN Wisconsin producer, host, and just about does a little bit of everything. I guess would be the best thing to say. And Alex, I was talking to you before we started. I was a little worried you may not be able to join me tonight. The concern was the fact that maybe you would get tapped in to play for the Dallas Mavericks tonight.
Yeah, they are relatively shorthanded from what I've been able to see. Nobody's playing for them. I saw our buddy Justin Garcia, the Bucks Radio Network, tweet out a picture of their layup line. I think they had 7 players in total in the layup line. Now, I mean, that's bizarre. I don't know that I've ever seen that little of a warm up. But yeah, despite my athletic achievements over the course of the last week, I did not get the phone call from Nico Harrison, but he's made a lot of mistakes the last month and a half, and this is just another one.
Yeah, well, are we going to get, and for those, I guess we can kind of mention in a second here, but are we going to get a pro day from you, or are you going to leave your results where they are?
Yeah, I guess I got to contact my alma mater, UW Stevens Point, and see if they'll let me use the facilities. No, I think I'm just going to keep training for next year's combine and hope I can up those scores. And we're tossing around the idea of maybe me trying some other sports, because clearly all of the football drills I tried last week were not very good. And if you have no idea what the hell we're talking about, which some of you might, you can check it out, ESPN Milwaukee on Twitter. It was the 3-cone drill heard around the world, and not in a good way.
Yeah, well, I kind of wanted to start off with the combine, not because of your athletic achievements doing the ESPN Wisconsin combine, but combine just happened, just wrapped up. What are your general thoughts coming out of the combine? Anybody you kind of fell in love with, or do you not look at the combine that way?
I mean, I flip it on just to watch these. I always enjoy like the D linemen, offensive linemen, these behemoth of men that are running 4.6s in the 40. Like I always get enjoyment out of that. But no, not a ton. I saw you shared something yesterday actually that triggered kind of my response, which was Logan Brown, who was one of the only 5-stars ever to commit to the University of Wisconsin. Could never really carve out a role, transferred to Kansas with former Whitewater coach Lance Leipold, and seemingly has talked his way into, it sounds like a top 3-round pick, and that the Packers are really into him. So that would be kind of a fun reunion for him in the state of Wisconsin. But I'm really not fully in draft mode yet, and that might be concerning considering it's 7 weeks away and I'm wearing an NFL draft hat. But I'm really in on college basketball right now. So I'll eventually turn the table and, start looking at some of the positional needs for Green Bay and some of the different prospects that really, jump off the page. I'm just not quite there yet. I imagine that's probably in the next few weeks is when I'll get there.
Well, I want to stick to the Packers before we switch to college basketball. Obviously, made the playoffs again, didn't go as far as we had all liked them to go. Looking at, I know you said you haven't really looked into much of the needs, but I know there's been conversations on the show you produced for. I was listening to the conversation today on my way home from work about Devontae Adams and DK Metcalf and the Packers possibly looking at adding a more veteran wide receiver and the possibility of that. I guess just summarize your thoughts there with Devontae or DK essentially being a Packer.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the top 3 needs for Green Bay, right? Like I think it's pretty easy to spot where the holes are. Wide receiver, especially at the top end, wide receiver. Edge, same thing, right? Like you have depth, but you need a top guy, and then corner. It seems like a position group that might need a little bit of an overhaul, right? You see, bring back 2 guys. You're likely without Jair, assuming they move on from him. But to your question on wide receivers, those are 2 top end names, and something the Packers desperately lacked. At least when we look at what was their season, they improved 2 wins, win 11 games in the regular season, but ultimately bounce out earlier than they did the year prior, is they didn't really have that top end guy, the security blanket, if you will, right? Like we remember Rodgers always kind of had that number 1 guy, and obviously he helped elevate guys because he was that good of a quarterback, but he had his Jordy Nelsons, he had his Greg Jennings, he had obviously his Devontae Adams toward the end of his tenure. And Jordan Love just doesn't have that yet because all the guys around him are so young. And that's not to say, right, Jaden Reed or Dontavian Wicks or Christian Watson, when fingers crossed he returns healthy after suffering that torn ACL at the end of last season, It's not to say those guys can't develop into a true number one, but I think the Packers are realizing, and obviously us as fans are realizing, you need that guy if you want to really capitalize on this window that's open. You've got your quarterback, you've got some really good pieces, but you need that security blanket, that top end wide receiver. So both of those guys make a ton of sense. I think DK Metcalf probably makes a little bit more sense given how Brian Gutekunst has operated in the past, right? He's under the age of 30. It technically would be his third contract, which we know the Packers don't love signing guys to, but he just turned 27. He's freshly 27 years old. He's been unbelievably productive. He's been in the league 6 years, a minimum of 50 catches and 900 yards in all 6 seasons, which I think he's probably one of few, if not the only receiver in NFL history to do that. Now, guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson will probably catch him, but I mean, it's ridiculous how productive, how durable, and how good he's been during his tenure in Seattle. So to see he's requesting a trade, if I'm Goody, right? Like I'm ringing the phone, I'm offering a 3rd round pick and maybe, send over a guy like Romeo Doubs, who's still got a year left on his contract, who's certainly in kind of a prove it deal, but a change of scenery wouldn't hurt him. So I think DK Metcalf probably makes a little bit more sense. But I've certainly been captaining the BBD, the bring back Devontae ship. Like I would love to see him back in Green Bay, just from a storyline perspective. And obviously as a Packers fan, one of my all-time favorites. So would love to see him back in Green Bay. I just think DK makes a little bit more sense, even though the Packers aren't the most, apt team when it comes to offering trades and bringing in big trade targets. It's just never really been their MO. But this one, where they are in terms of, in a tough division, winning 11 games a year ago, they need to get better at that position. And that seems like a guy that makes a ton of sense.
I know last year the talk is the very deep at receiver. They don't need a number one. They have 4 or 5 guys that can any given day kind of be that guy that the Packers could lean on.
And Evan, boy, has that changed, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, none of them took that next, so on the surface, that's what people are saying. But like deeper into it is you're also hoping one of Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, Heath, Milton, you're hoping one of those guys, mostly Watson, would take that next step to be more of a bona fide number one guy, and none of them did. They led the league in drops. Wicks and Reed couldn't seem to hang on to a football if you their hands. And the Packers, the expectations are different. I think I said last year when I had you on prior to free agency about bringing in a veteran safety before they brought McKinney in, is that expectations are raised and they need to address the room and get better there. And both obviously Devontae and DK will definitely improve that room. And you're also going to help Wicks. You're going to help Dobbs if you keep him. You're going to help Reed by bringing those veterans into the room to kind of help teach them, like, hey, this is how you need to do it as a professional. And we all know Devontae had drop issues at one point in his career, and those went away.
Yeah, and he's probably the best example, right? I mean, he was a guy that, as you mentioned, struggled with it the first 2 years of his career, and then he developed into the best receiver in football. And I think both those guys you mentioned, right, Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, seem like they have like terribly high ceilings. Wicks is explosive off the snap, a really solid route runner. I've always kind of called Jaden Reed like a Deebo Samuel light. Like he is capable of so many different things in your offense. You can throw so many different things in a defensive, you're in an opposing defense, excuse me, with Jaden Reed. So both of those guys have awesome skill sets. They're just so young. And I think they could grow so much by having that proven commodity on the offense and in the room with them, whether that be a Devontae or a DK Metcalf or maybe some of the other names that are out on the open market, like Christian Kirk I saw was released today. I don't think that's a guy the Packers would make a run after, but again, that's another guy where if you throw him into the room, okay, you have some veteran presence. And I think that's something this room has desperately lacked. So even if it's not DK Metcalf, even if it's not Devontae Adams, I would like to see Goody go get somebody that is a little bit more of that quote unquote proven commodity, just because I think it makes that big of a difference.
Jordan Love's had, I think it's fair to say, some up and down play. His first year as a starter, I keep wanting to say rookie year, but not his rookie year. His first year as a starter, closed the season very strong after a middle part of the season where he struggled. And last year, up and down, and maybe the injury had something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sold that Jordan Love is that guy and it's about building around him, or do you still have some doubts there?
I mean, there's still progression and growth to be had for sure. Like, I think you and I would agree on that. Do I think he's the guy? Yeah. I mean, his contract indicates he will be the guy no matter what we think. You know, you don't pay a guy that much and eventually move on from him. Now, there's been obviously catastrophic contracts in NFL history, especially at that position, right? Look at like a Russell Wilson in Denver, but that's a guy that had won a Super Bowl at that point.
Look at Cleveland. Sorry,
right?
Matt.
Yeah, Cleveland, absolutely, the creep. So I ultimately think yes, he's the guy. Now, do I think he is a top 5 quarterback in the league? Not right now. I don't. Is he top 10? Probably, and if not, he's really close. I think he's a franchise quarterback, and that's really hard to find in the NFL. But you know, Brad Nortman and I before the show yesterday, Evan, and it's just an exercise we kind of stumbled into, and it was fun to kind of realize this is we were talking about Aaron Rodgers and how, you know, if he retires, it'll kind of be sad because that's kind of going to be the end of the era of like the 2000s quarterbacks, right? Like both the Mannings, Brady, Breeze, you know, who am I missing? Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, right? Like Aaron Rodgers is kind of the last of that group. And you look at this group and you start thinking, okay, like the new face of the league quarterback wise, like who is it? Okay, Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts is probably in there. How many names do we have to list until we go, yep, Jordan Love? Because I think like you throw Jaden Daniels in front of him. You throw CJ Stroud probably in front of him. Justin Herbert, I haven't even mentioned yet, right? So how long will it be? And again, he's only been a starter for 2 years. So it's kind of unfair to throw him into that conversation. But how long will it be until he's in that conversation where in 10, 15 years when these guys are retiring and leaving the league, do we go, oh man, Jordan Love's like the last of that group. It's going to be sad to see him go. So it was just kind of a fun conversation Brad and I had off the air that made me go, I wonder how long it will be until we're throwing Jordan Love in that same category as the Burrows and the Allens and the Mahomes and the Jacksons.
I think Daniels has a huge upside, but I don't know if I'm ready to put him above ahead of Love right now just because he just had his rookie year. Great rookie year.
I mean, look,
quarterbacks have great rookie years and then fall off a cliff, you know.
For sure, right? Like Stroud is a good example. I don't want to say he fell off a cliff, but he certainly took a backslide, sophomore slump, as we've heard. The thing with Daniels, though, is, man, he's so versatile and he's so fun to watch.
Debo.
What's that?
And he got some help with Debo.
He did. And you know, that I'm sure we'll get into free agency and everything that needs to happen. But Washington, a team that goes from an NFC championship to immediately doing what they can to improve, you know, fix their shortcomings. And that's something that the Packers desperately need to do here over the course of, you know, what day is it today? Wednesday, over the course of the next couple of days. And once free agency begins on Monday. So we'll see.
Week from today, the league year officially opens, I believe. So I'm kind of excited to see that. And the Packers do have a tendency not to be there day 1, day 2 when all the stupid money gets spent, but I'm kind of curious to see what Goody does.
Yeah, I mean, they were there last year, right? I mean, so in you know, it's weird how it works, right? You mentioned the new league year starts Wednesday at 11 our time, noon Central, but you can legally negotiate beginning Monday at 11 a.m. Right. So I was talking to Jason Wilde because I was like, trigger my memory. Was it Wednesday or Monday we found out about Jacobs? He said it was Monday, and we found out about McKinney on Monday, but it wasn't legal / official until Wednesday. So we really get free agency going on Monday. And then Wednesday, obviously, is when everything becomes official and the new league year begins. So, I mean, these trades you see that have been agreed upon, and I would not be shocked, you know, today's Wednesday, by the end of the work week, if we see a DK Metcalf trade in place. Hey, heck, knowing our luck, Evan, there might be a DK Metcalf trade announced by the time we're done with this podcast, given some of the news that has happened the times we've done this together. So,
yeah, my phone to see if anything's changed while you were talking.
Right. So, I mean, it's going to be a really fun, you know, next week or so. And we'll have a way better idea a week from today on how the Packers have positioned themselves, you know, really heading into the back end of free agency and then the draft. And as we said at the top, it's not like the Packers have massive needs, right? They need a top end receiver. They need a really, I still think they need a huge impact guy on the edge because that was their biggest bugaboo a year ago. And then corner is just such an interesting position to me because you have Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine, who are good corners, but you're going to be without Jair. You're losing Eric Stokes, assuming you don't bring him back. You really only have two corners on the roster. So do you fix that through the draft, or do you fill those holes through the draft and just hope those guys can develop? Do you try to sign a big name free agent? Do you try to sign like a low name free agent who can be a good second or third piece? Corner's the one I can't figure out. Receiver and edge seem like, okay, if you want to be a Super Bowl contender, you're going to take those swings prior to the draft. Corner, I don't know what they're going to do, if anything.
Yeah, I think the Eagles definitely show that if you have a pass rush that can make a quarterback's life a living hell, you can put two rookie corners back there, as the Eagles did with Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and you can have a pretty good secondary. So
that's really true. That's a really good point.
I think that pass rush is priority number one. As yes, they finished top 10 or whatever it was for sacks, but most of those came in 3 games.
Yeah, most of them came in 3 games. You're totally right. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's a problem. I think everybody knows it's a problem, but how do they address it? How do they approach it? Is it through free agency? I mean, look, Max Crosby obviously signed his deal today, so he's off the table. I still think Myles Garrett is a pipe dream. There's just no way the Packers would offer enough for a guy like Myles Garrett, which maybe you could make the same case for DK Metcalf. It's just interesting, that comes a week after some of those rumors were released that the Packers were interested in him. So we will see, man. I am waiting on pins and needles to see how Goody approaches this one, because last year he finally went into free agency and said, hey, Aaron Jones has been great for us, but let's just go sign a top end guy. And then safety was a position he completely needed to reinvent. He went free agent route for McKinney, and then he drafted 3, and 2 of them clearly worked out really well in Evan Williams and Javon Bullard. So it's always a really fun time of year because we all try to guess, right? We all try to, maybe he'll do this or maybe he'll do that. And we never really know what he's thinking and what the front office is thinking. So we're going to get some answers soon, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I know the big popular name circulating social media today is Dayo Odongbo from the Colts, who's going to be then hey, why not, right? Bring him in, see what happens. You got him, you have Gary, you have Van Ness, Kiki and Gambare. One of those has to be able to get you close to double-digit sacks, you'd hope.
You think, right? Joshie DiMaggio said this today on Mr. Irrelevant, and I hadn't thought about it this harshly, but he's right? Like, I'm to a point now where I'm not worried if somebody comes in and takes Lucas Van Ness's snaps away, right? It's been 2 years. It hasn't worked. I'm not worried if somebody comes in and takes a guy who I actually liked what I saw from last year prior to the injury in week, whatever that was, 4 or 5 against the Vikings. But if they bring in an interior guy and they take snaps away from Devontae Wyatt, it's been 3 years, man. If you belong on the field, you would have proven that already. So I'm curious to see just how they approach it. And I could sit here, Evan, all night. We could sit here till 3 a.m, guessing and talking about the different possibilities. But Goody's going to do something we don't expect. That I believe in firmly. But what that is, I have no idea.
I don't think I didn't expect McKinney, and thank you to Kay Adams for that help, but I didn't expect McKinney and Jacobs at all at this point last year. They weren't even on my radar. I was like, well, I wonder what day 5 or 6 guy Goody's going to pick up now. But I guess the one thing I will say, every time the Packers have had money to spend, Goody spent money. His first, his second year as GM, you have the Smiths, you have Turner, and you have Adrian Amos, and that's partially why they're in salary cap hell for the next 2 years, aside from Rodgers' contract. But speaking of Rodgers,
where
do him end up next year?
I don't know how to answer this. I to be honest with you, Evan, like my brain is really weird, right? Like I think about a lot of things a lot. I think number one, like really since the season ended, is okay. How do the Packers approach the offseason?
For a second, I listened to KBN and Mr. Irrelevant enough that you don't have to tell me
that. Yeah, that's fair. But I think about all these things way too much. Like they take up way too much space in my brain. But number 2 after that is probably, man, do I really want to see Aaron Rodgers play one more year. Like, I really do. And I look, I don't want to listen to him talk because I'm kind of over that. But I love watching the guy play football. And he had a couple moments with the Jets this year, which I watched a lot of, where I went, damn, he still got it. And so I really hope the answer is not retirement. I really hope the answer is not Tennessee. I really hope the answer is not the New York Giants. Although it seems like that could probably be the answer, is the Giants. Like, Pittsburgh seemed like it made a ton of sense, but now it's seeming like that's probably not going to happen. Doesn't really seem like the Raiders is going to be the thing, which could be fun with him and Pete Carroll. So I really don't have a great answer for you. You know, as of 7:53 p.m. on March 5th, I'll say the Giants. My answer is probably different at 7:53 a.m. when I'm on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy tomorrow morning. Like, I don't have a great feel for Rodgers. But again, a week from right now, we might have our answer.
Well, you got a long day tomorrow then, huh? Morning show and other stuff.
Yeah, but Evan, I mean, if my long day is talking about sports and pressing buttons, that's not the worst day in the world, you know.
So, but moving on, switching to completely different sport and sports entertainment, I guess would be more the accurate term, but probably the biggest turn since 1996 Bash at the Beach with Hulk Hogan turning heel with the leg drop on Macho Man with nobody except Bobby the Brain Heenan saw coming. I don't know if you went back and watched that when Hogan was coming down, Bobby the Brain Heenan, but what side is he on? I don't know if anyone else caught that, but
of course,
you know. And then now John Cena, who's been basically a face since probably early career, the fucking after he transitioned from Thugonomics, been a face, and now he's a heel for the first time in over 20 years. So, what were your impressions coming out of Elimination Chamber and going into early in the WrestleMania season?
Yeah. So I expected him to win. You know, I thought Punk had a chance too, just because the Rhodes Punk thing, it's going to happen eventually. Not quite yet. But yeah, this is it's mind boggling. Like, I think we all expected it during this run, right? During the Cena retirement tour, we probably thought we were going to see maybe the Doctor of Thugonomics or some sort of heel character. The thing with Cena as a heel is, I think we're all going to cheer for him still, right? Like, it's awesome. It's badass. Now, the thing I didn't see coming. No, go ahead.
We all loved Hollywood Hogan.
Exactly, right? And the thing I don't think anybody saw coming was the alignment with The Rock. And for whatever reason, Travis Scott, but we don't need to get into that. The alignment with The Rock is the part where I'm going, what in the world? Right? I mean, these guys have had beef for 20 years at this point. I mean, it's just something I never saw coming. Cena always said he wouldn't be The Rock. He kind of turned into The Rock by doing all the Hollywood stuff. Now he comes back and now it's just, that's the part I didn't see coming. But heel Cena, it's a brilliant move. It's something we've all wanted for a long time. John Cena, admittedly, is my favorite wrestler ever, right? He's the only probably the only wrestling t-shirt other than Joe Hendry I currently own. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I didn't think it would happen this quickly, though. To be honest with you, I thought they would do the embrace and then it would come if they were going to do it prior to Mania. But I love it. I mean, it's the biggest WWE storyline, maybe other than the Bloodline, since maybe the Shield that has my attention the most. Because I'm not like the most avid WWE fan. I keep up. I watch through TikTok. I keep up on social media. I don't watch Raw and SmackDown typically, but this has me going. I should probably turn on Raw the next time Cena's there because I cannot wait for what he's going to say. So awesome. I mean, awesome. I'm over the moon about it.
And so I got some years on you, just full disclosure here. I remember the Attitude Era very well. And one of the things about the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era was just legit unpredictability. Like you would have title changes on Raw. You would have title changes on SmackDown. You wouldn't have these 640 days as champion, 800 days or whatever as champion. You would have that unpredictability. And one of the things I've liked outside of Roman Reigns' reign is it seems that unpredictability is back from post Ruthless Aggression until Hunter era. I'm just going to call it the Hunter era because, he's the guy in charge now. There wasn't a lot of unpredictability except for occasionally the Shield showing up. But
right.
I like the fact that there's some unpredictability, as everyone assumed Rhea Ripley's going to keep her title on Raw. Well, wow, Io Sky just won the championship, and it's likely going to lead to a triple threat match. But I like that unpredictability.
I do too, and it's something you're totally right. It's something that hasn't been around. I mean, to your point, that was the one unpredictable thing. You don't really know what they're going to do, when the turn's coming, etc. You had it, but ever since Triple H has taken control, it is an amazing product. I think the Gen Z term, which I technically fall into, I'm an old Gen Z, is like cinema, right? We always say, "Oh, that's cinema." This is cinema. I mean, this is the best professional wrestling sports entertainment has been in a really long time. And, like, I'm rejuvenated. As I mentioned, I'm not like the everyday watcher, but I'm still watching, 30% of Raw through TikTok and Twitter and all the other means you can watch it. This Cena thing, though, I mean, really, really, really good. Perfect timing, perfect move. Everybody is just waiting to see what's next from him. And we know now we're not going to see him for a while, but it makes a must-see WrestleMania main event, which, to be real honest with you, I don't think we got from the Rumble, right? Uso winning the Rumble was fun, and everybody got to yell yeet really loud. But I don't know that him and Gunther, moves the needle entirely for a lot of people. Cody versus Cena with The Rock in Cena's corner, like, that is must watch television. Which again, I'm not mad about the Rumble decision. It is what it is. This is a way to recover, though. And now that you have your 2 nights of WrestleMania, you're making one of those nights absolutely must watch, even for the not so in all the time fan.
And I think the Rumble, too, just shows unpredictability, because everyone's talking about how Cena's going to win the Rumble, CM Punk's going to win the Rumble, and it comes down to Jey Uso, who most people think was going to win the Rumble. So it just adds to that unpredictability.
Good point.
And remember WrestleMania last year with Cody and Roman, you had Undertaker show up, you had Cena show up, you had Solo, Jay, Jimmy, you name it. Who knows what's in store this year? Big internet rumor is maybe Stone Cold answers that call, because him and The Rock has a huge history, and rumor has it Austin was supposed to be there last year, but they couldn't figure out a money arrangement.
Well, hopefully they can, because that would be awesome.
Moving on, Bucks currently beating the Mavericks 70-51 in I guess the Mavericks G League team.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Outside of Mark Christie, who obviously isn't a superstar NBA player, and Klay Thompson, they're playing the G League team. The Bucks made a couple moves at the deadline. They get Kyle Kuzma and Trey Middleton. They get Kevin Porter Jr. They get Jericho Sims. What are your thoughts on the Bucks since the trade deadline?
Younger, more athletic, and cheaper. And something I think you and I have talked about when we've talked Bucks in the past, whether it be on this show or when we're just hanging around the office, is who's going to be that quote unquote third scoring option, right? Like, we have Giannis, we have Dame. Previously it was Giannis and Chris. Who's going to step up as that third? Sometimes it was Brook Lopez. In previous eras, obviously you had Drew Holiday or Eric Bledsoe. I don't know now. I think the way they've been playing post-trade deadline, you don't need a consistent third scoring option. You need somebody that is the third scoring option in any given game, but I think you have more options than ever, right? Kuzma, Brook Lopez, who's obviously older and slower than he used to be, but still a good basketball player and still capable of a lot of things on both ends of the court. The KPJ trade, highway robbery, right? You trade out Marjan Bocic,
who got caught by the Clippers.
Right. Who wasn't doing anything for you. And you bring in a guy who can play 20 minutes and give you 15 points on any given night, right? And his game is really fun to watch when it's on a team you're rooting for. It's irritating when it's not on a team you're rooting for.
Control. He sometimes plays a little bit out of control, which
I just think it's like this. And maybe you need this. Maybe you need it in the NBA, but it's just like this outrageous self-confidence. Where, okay, the ball's in my hands, I'm going to make something happen. And he has that. And at least as of now, and we're very early into the KPJ Bucks tenure, it's very fun to watch for me. So I really like where they're at now. Do I put them above, the Celtics? Probably not. But would I like to see that series in the Eastern Conference Finals? Hell yeah, I would. So I think they're improved. I think they're in a better spot than they were pre-trade deadline. The biggest thing with Middleton was, as sad as all of us were to see him go as Bucks fans, availability is the best ability. And you have a lot more availability now, even down Bobby Portis, who was obviously suspended for those 25 games. It's a team that's in a good spot. And I'm really excited to see what happens come at the end of April.
I'm super excited too. It kind of seemed to bring a new energy to the Bucks too. Kuzma seems to be more similar to the Los Angeles Lakers Kuzma than what we saw in Washington, and Sims has given you some quality minutes here and there. And outside of the fourth quarter against Houston, Porter has been a good spark plug to this team as well. He mentioned end of April. I was having this thought today.
Oh boy.
The NBA play-in, they have the play-in, and this is what, year 4 or year 5 of the play-in? Those
I think is it year 4.
Yeah, it was a COVID bubble when they started it, and that was what, spring of 2020, summer 2020 when the NBA came back.
Yeah.
So year 4 of the bubble. I mean, not the bubble. Year 4 of the play-in. Are you better off having a 3 seed or possibly even a 4 seed, knowing you have one home playoff series at least in the first round, and you know who you're hosting, you know who you're playing, than a 1 or a 2 seed at this point with that whole play-in tournament?
No, I don't think so. I think it's an interesting thought. I'm just hashing through this as we talk here, Evan. I mean, it's an interesting thought, but no, I don't think so. Obviously, you have more time to prepare, but if you're a 1 seed, right? So if you're the Boston Celtics or the Cleveland Cavaliers, or on the Western Conference side, if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, who seem like a lock for the 1 seed in the West, does it really matter, right? You're playing a team that's going to play a couple more games, going to be a little bit more tired, not as well rested. They got to play. If we're going to go 7, they're going to play on your home court 4 times. I don't think so, because you're just still so much more outmatched. Whereas like 4-5, well, I think it's still Pacers Bucks at 4-5, vice versa. Well, that could be an interesting series, and I believe in the Bucks much more than I do the Pacers. I mean, if you take let's say Cleveland and whoever is the 8 seed, I still think there's just such a mismatch there. So I would ponder no, but there might be years where your theory is correct.
Well, Bucks won the title as a 3. Granted, they had Kyrie and Harden and getting hurt, and Kevin Durant wearing a size shoe too big to help, but they were a 3 there. Back to the Bucks quick before we move on to the last topic, which is March Madness and the Badgers in particular. For the Bucks, the only thing that matters is playoffs is Giannis and Dame's health, right? Because the last 2 years, Giannis has been injured. He didn't play at all last year. He got hurt the year they won the championship. Lillard had some injury issues against Indiana last year. He had to fight through things. That's the most important thing for the Bucks from this playoff, right? There's really nothing else that matters.
You nailed it. I mean, it's you got to be healthy, especially those two. While they're rolling a little bit without Bobby, he's going to be a huge piece down the stretch. So, I mean, it comes down to health. If those guys are healthy, they've got a shot against anybody, as far as I'm concerned.
The one matchup I don't like is the Knicks, just because Jalen Brunson turns into Michael Jordan every time he plays the Bucks.
Sure does. Certainly, you're totally right about that. But
like Jordan's whistle too.
Yeah, also true. But I want to see that Celtics series. I want to see it in the Eastern Conference Finals if I want to see it, though.
Yeah, and then lastly, March Madness. March is here. Badgers, other than the loss to Michigan State and Oregon recently, they're rolling up currently on the Golden Gophers. Where do you see their ceiling in the NCAA tournament? Can they make a run to the Final Four, or is it the Elite 8, Sweet 16, or is it too soon to tell? Because we know, to me, matchups are the most important thing come tournament.
Yeah, and obviously that's the cop-out answer, right? Well, let me see who's in their way, right? Let me see who's in their path. I think the ceiling is probably Elite Eight. By all means, I hope they prove me wrong, right? Like I would love to see Marquette versus Wisconsin in the national championship game every day of the year, or every year, right? But the thing with Wisconsin is I just get so nervous when they play an elite big, right? And I like Stephen Crowell. I like Nolan Winter. I like what they've done this year, and it seems like a nice jump for Winter, who obviously had a huge game in that loss the other night. I think 17 boards or something for him. It seemed like he was just picking up everything. But they just don't have an answer defensively, it seems. And offensively, they get shut down if they're facing a really good big. Now, the good news is Purdue doesn't have Zach Edey anymore. So that's why that game went so well for them a couple weeks ago. But I like their backcourt a lot. I love what John Tonje has evolved into. You know, early in the season, I think we all watched him and go, okay, but is that sustainable? And it seems like for the most part, it has been. Now, he's had his down games by all means, but it seems overall, though, that John Tonje could be the answer for this Badgers team. Max Klesmit working his way back from an injury, didn't play again tonight, but lost the boot tonight. I think I don't know if it was a foot or an ankle injury for him, but you know, if they're healthy, especially him, and they have Blackwell and they have Tonje in that backcourt, they've got the potential to beat anybody. I mean, the way they shoot the three ball this year is just unlike any Badgers team we've ever seen. So, yeah, I think they're well coached. I think they're well disciplined. I think they're still solid defensively, and they've evolved so well offensively with the three ball. They're so efficient at the free throw line. If they get the right matchups, I think they can roll well into the second weekend. But look, I mean, when it comes to that second weekend, that's got to happen this year. This has to be the year they get back to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2017. It feels like maybe other than that Johnny Davis year, which would have been what, 22 or 23.
I remember. I remember it was 22.
You know, it feels like this is probably their best chance since then. Obviously, they missed the tournament one of those years. But I just. This feels like it has to be the year for Greg Gard, who desperately needs to get back to the Sweet 16, get all the doubters off his back. And it's been a great year for the Greg Gard doubters, man. All of them have been as quiet as a church mouse. And that is great to see, because I think he is a terrific college basketball coach. I think I'm so impressed by the way he's evolved with the changes in college athletics. You know, I had him on my Coaches Week special before the season. And I thought, Evan, you know, Greg Gard could be a guy that could just sit there and bitch and moan about the new era of college basketball, right? He lost 7 or 8 guys in the transfer portal. He lost Chucky Hepburn as point guard for 3 years. He lost his leading scorer in AJ Storr to a ton of money. You know, Tyler Wall graduates, a ton of bench players leave. And he could sit there and say, look, it's unsustainable. There's no way to, you know, trot out a team that competes in college basketball anymore with everybody leaving after every season for more money. But he went out the portal, he reloaded, he found guys like John Tonje and Xavier Amos, who has contributed a little bit off the bench. And he's just continued to develop these other pieces. And they've turned into a really, really, really good team. I mean, 12th in the country this week. I'm just so impressed by the way he has rebuilt that roster, and they've evolved their game. I mean, this was not a 3-point shooting team a year ago. And they're one of the better teams in the country in that statistical category. So I think they can be really good, Evan. It depends on the matchup. If they get a small school with an elite big, yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried it's James Madison all over again.
Yeah, and to bring up the 2022 with the Johnny Davis, Chucky Hepburn went down in
rode that ankle.
Iowa State rode an ankle and kind of just fell apart from there, and they lost to Iowa State. But one more college basketball question. Unless UWM goes on a huge run in the Horizon tournament, there's going to be one other Wisconsin team in the tournament. That's going to be Marquette. Where do you see Marquette finishing off this year?
Well, tonight might change my answer. They're at UConn. They're playing right now. It's really early in the first half, 2-point game. But I struggle with them right now, to be honest with you. They've been kind of in this weird scoring drought. And for a team that obviously lost some huge pieces from last year's team, right? Both Oso Iguodala and Tyler Kolek to the NBA. It seemed like coming into this year, they were going to be really good, right? Like you felt great about Cam Jones running the point. You felt great about what Chase Ross could do defensively and what David Joplin could do defensively, and how pesky they can be. But offensively, they just haven't been very good the last month.
They like starting ball too.
Yeah, right. And so I'm having a hard time diagnosing them. Like I thought at one point this year they could be Final Four good. Now all of a sudden I'm going, they might only be a round of 32 good. But if they get hot at the right time, if Shaka, who again just a terrific coach, can continue to get this team, deflections and steals and turnovers defensively, yeah, they can make a run. I mean, they can make a further run than Wisconsin for how talented they are and how well coached they are. But for whatever reason, they haven't been able to get the lid off the hoop the last month. And that's obviously very, very concerning given they're playing in a much weaker Big East than it's been in past years. Like St. John's is still really good. Obviously one of the best teams in the country. But overall, the Big East isn't that good. They might have 4 or 5 tournament teams at most. So the struggle the last month has been strange. Sorry, go ahead.
So the defending national champions are having a rough year. Kansas, switching leagues, they're having a rough year. So.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking with me a little bit about the wide world of gamut of sports, Packers, WWE, Bucks, Badgers, Marquette. Want to let the viewers and listeners know where they can catch you out every day, and then every other day, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got options, right? So you mentioned every day, Kyle Bruston Nortman, 2 to 5, ESPN, Milwaukee, 2 to 4 on ESPN, Madison and ESPN Beaver Dam, wherever you live in this lovely state or online on YouTube. You can catch my show, Mr. Irrelevant, which features Josh DiMaggio, Hunter Vaughn, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We stream live at 12:30 Central, but you can find that one wherever you get your podcast, guests, conversation, a lot of Packers stuff. And obviously diving a little bit deeper into college hoops now this time of year because I'm a little bit of a nut job when it comes to college basketball. And then if you're making your Sunday runs, maybe hitting the grocery store, you can catch Sunday Karma from 10 to noon every Sunday on all those ESPN stations and wherever you get your podcasts. Just an array of nonsense every Sunday morning. So those are kind of the main spots you can catch me, and you can get me on Twitter at Alex_Strouf.
Have you and Wody figured anything out in regards? Obviously, it's not weekly Wody anymore. Have you figured out that at all yet, or no?
Yeah, we're doing like a monthly Wildy for the time being. So I'm going to give him a couple more weeks off. I think we'll probably record an episode next Thursday, which will be our first since the Thursday after the Super Bowl. And then once training camp kicks up, we'll go back to a weekly format on that. But yeah, that's a fun show too, man. Putting Wildy in kind of the reactor's chair and picking his brain on different conversations he's having in the locker room every week. So yeah, that's also one of the many, many things I'm a part of that you pointed out at the top. But I'm lucky I get to do what I do. And look, man, I'm sitting at home and I have 4 college basketball games on the TV. I love talking sports. It's what I do anyway. So to get paid a little bit for it is certainly not the worst.
Yeah, again, I appreciate you coming on. And for those watching, the audio version, the podcast will drop tomorrow morning on Spotify and iTunes and anywhere you get your podcast. And make sure you find the show on YouTube or Facebook, as well as here on X, Talking Sports with Evan on Facebook and YouTube. And make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe. I've been doing a weekly NFL draft chat. I've had some guests on, done a solo show as well, because I had a guest drop off last second, but a lot of great NFL draft content there as well. So make sure you check that out. But back with you next week. Appreciate you all. Have a good rest of your week. And I guess go Bucks.